Good evening, Jeopardy fans, and we are live here on hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel, presented by thejeopardｙfan.com. Once again, and as always, I am Andy Saunders, and I will be moderating tonight's discussion. I have a one-on-one interview tonight with Zach Dark, so let's get right into this. So Zach, first of all, congratulations on your wins on Jeopardy last week. Early on, a pair of wins, so congratulations and thanks for joining me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, what's become my first question here on hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel recently? I find that most Jeopardy contestants begin as Jeopardy fans, and most Jeopardy fans, as it were, have an origin story as to how they became Jeopardy fans. So, Zach, I ask you, how did you become a Jeopardy fan in the first place?
Well, I feel like a Jeopardy lifer. I've been playing the game for as long as I can remember. I grew up playing it with my father. I even had the Jeopardy PlayStation game and some of the other games. And I've played it. I've made it an appointment to play it as often as I can.
Very nice. And so, I guess, a little bit of a follow-up question. How difficult is it becoming I should say, are you originally from Alabama?
I am. Yes.
Okay. How difficult is it becoming a Jeopardy fan in a place where Jeopardy airs in the afternoon, or even in some markets in the state in the morning?
It varies. I think when I was growing up, it came on at a time when I was able to watch it, and obviously now with DVR, that certainly helps. I'm able to record it because it does come on at 2:30 in the afternoon here while I'm at work. So I'm able to record it and watch it on my own time.
Okay. Now, my next question for you is when did you audition, and and was this your first audition, or have you had multiple auditions?
I've had multiple. I auditioned twice for the college tournament many years ago. And then for the adult tournament, I first auditioned. I took the test as often as I could, the online test, but my first in-person audition was 2015 in Atlanta. Didn't work out, but I went to Nashville in 2017, and that's how this all got started.
Very nice. And then, of course, you got the call. How surprising was it to get the call?
It was very surprising. I was not expecting it. They tell you you'll be on a waiting list for as long as a year and a half even. So I certainly wasn't expecting it. I just happened to be home on a Friday. I think it was the Friday before Veterans Day. I just had my 2-year-old son with me, and we were just spending the day together. And I got the call, and normally I wouldn't answer the phone if I didn't recognize the number. I'd let it go to voicemail, but for some reason I just I felt like answering it, and I'm glad I did.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you got the call, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, if my notes are correct, your episode's taped around the 12th of December, if that sounds right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
So, you get out there, you get out to Culver City. I guess it must have been quite something to hear that, I guess it must have been probably Maggie announcing exactly who Paris Femin was. So I guess that must have been quite an experience, sharing your green room with him.
It was. I don't know that he would have introduced himself that way. He certainly has had a successful career and other aspects of his life, but Maggie outed him as the one and only Mike Teevee from the original Willy Wonka.
Mm-hmm. So obviously that went, I guess, viral, as it were, especially because Alex Trebek decided he wasn't going to mention that Paris had played Mike Teevee on the broadcast. So
I think it was on, Alex gets a card with 3 facts and then he can choose from there. I think it was on Paris's card. I think Alex chose to go a different direction.
Okay. Speaking of the card, as it were, did Alex knock off the 3 things on your card for your 3 games?
He did. I think I was a little surprised at the order that he went in. Obviously, the first episode, I didn't know that I would be back for more. So, the Aaron Sorkin fact about me, I mean, that can describe a lot of people. That's not unique to me, obviously. So I was a little surprised that he went in that direction. I think Mark, the returning champion that day, had listed that he was a Tolkien fan, and maybe Alex wanted the similar sounding Sorkin and Tolkien, and that's the direction he went in.
I also think it's interesting that a clue about the West Wing came up a little bit later on during your run, and I'm wondering if that's why he picked it.
I didn't think about that, but you might be right. Of course, he didn't know that I'd be around at that point, but it's certainly a possibility that it crossed his mind.
Mm-hmm. Now, you obviously were picked to play in the Monday game first up without actually seeing anything happen from the bullpen, as it were. How did it feel to get picked first? Were you just happy to be, ready to go, or would you have been happier having a couple of games from the audience first?
I think for me it was great just going ahead and going. I think if I had sat there in the audience and watched another game or multiple games, I think that would have just made me even more nervous.
Okay.
So in a way, I was kind of glad to be first up.
Okay. Now, how did you prepare? What sort of things did you do to prepare for Jeopardy?
As far as studying or learning new material, I honestly didn't try to learn any new material, although I probably should have. But for me, it was more about the reflexes and the buzzer, trying to get that, playing along as I were. And, when you audition, they give you a click pin that kind of resembles a buzzer. So that certainly helped. I also tried to, study some wagering strategies and make sure that I was familiar with that if the need for that came up.
Now, obviously, that didn't really need to come up, as it were, in your first game, as you sort of certainly ran roughshod over your 2 opponents that first time out.
I just looked up when Double Jeopardy ended. I looked up. I honestly had not paid that much attention to the score. It's kind of out of your line of sight a little bit. You have to make a conscious effort to look at it, and I just happened to look at it, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Now, unfortunately, over your 3 games, you only got to play a single daily double?
Yeah, that was a little frustrating. That's just how the board goes, I guess. But I did just get the 1, and I was thankful that I got it correct anyway.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also had at least by my notes, you did pretty well on all 3 of your Final Jeopardy clues. So, can you talk about your thought process on Final Jeopardy at all, on any of them?
Day 1 was Best Truman, First Lady Facts, and I felt pretty good with that category. I think. Well, let me back up. Just a funny story. When you're wagering, they say that once you lock it in, that's it. You can't change it. Well, I wagered, and obviously I could have wagered more because, like you said, Day 1 was a runaway. But part of me was just reluctant to test my math skills, I guess, and I didn't want to mess that up and accidentally risk too much and go viral for all the wrong reasons or something like that. Mm-hmm. But so I did wager a little conservatively. But when I locked my wager in, they came over to me and said, um, we've got to make sure we know what you've written. And I immediately panicked, thinking I've messed the math up and have done something wrong. And apparently they just couldn't read my handwriting, which I can understand that. I felt like the pen, the stylus, or whatever you're writing with is it doesn't look like my actual handwriting. So that made me a little nervous when they had to verify what my actual wager was. But as far as the category itself, I felt pretty good with First Lady Facts. As soon as they said Best Truman, I had a pretty good feeling. It seems like I remembered President Truman being present at the Medicare bill signing. And I did the math, 1982 minus 17, and that got me about where I thought Medicare had been enacted. So felt pretty good about that. Day 2 was 50s fiction, I believe, 1950s fiction. Didn't feel as comfortable on that one, and it didn't come to me right away. If you watch the video, I don't think I started writing right away. Once I got to Ayn Rand, I had it narrowed down to 2, Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. And I just felt like Atlas Shrugged was probably the more recognizable of her 2 works that the New York Times would have commented on. So that worked out well. Day 3 was the Electoral College, and I found that one especially easy. Maybe that's just me, and I'm a kind of a political junkie, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but a student of politics, I guess. I felt like that one came to me right away, even so.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not I think a lot of people around thought that Final Jeopardy on Wednesday was one of the easier ones of the season, for sure.
Yeah, and I wagered. I was behind, obviously, going into Final Jeopardy that day. I wagered to, assuming I got it right and just hoping that Peter didn't. But, of course, he did get it, and he certainly deserved to win that day.
How did you find the signaling device? I know you mentioned the pen earlier to kind of, practice out, between audition and the show. But how did you find the signaling device, as it were?
In the rehearsal that morning, I think I struggled a little bit getting the timing right. It was probably just nerves. I feel like, honestly, they may have sensed that and let me stay up there and practice, until I really got it, which I was appreciative of, found that very helpful. So I think it just took me a little while longer than maybe some of the others to get the timing right, but it worked out in the end, I guess.
So speaking of rehearsal, watching, or, I don't know how much you might have paid attention to the others in rehearsal, or were you, maybe if you were just more worried about getting your own buzzer timing down, but was there anyone else in rehearsal that you were kind of afraid of trying to, having to play?
Peter, honestly, there were a lot of us up there rehearsing at different times, and it's kind of hard to keep track of names and faces at that point for me. It's something I struggle with anyway. But I did have a pretty good feeling that Peter was going to be a tough contestant to go up against. And what do you know? I was right.
I find it really interesting when I ask that question of my panel from time to time. It's so often people end up saying, yeah, well, I was most afraid of whomever they ended up being paired against, or the person who ended up beating them on the show. So I find that really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, remember the contestants that I went up against. Those 6, I guess, that I competed against certainly stand out more to me than Thursday and Friday, those episodes, and today as well.
By the way, if you are listening on right now, there is a YouTube live chat. There's a hashtag on Twitter. I am keeping an eye on both of those. So if you have any questions for Zach and you're listening to this, feel free to type them in. I'd love to ask Zach those questions. Were there any categories that you wish you'd seen, when you were up there on playing? Like any categories you were really hoping for?
Um, I don't know that we had any sports categories, and that's certainly a niche category for some people, but I'm pretty comfortable with that. Certainly the TV category with TV presidents, that one was right in my expertise. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
I did get beat on the West Wing Clue, which was that one hurt, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's the buzzer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, uh, American history, politics, those sort of things. I like the wordplay categories. That one, I think we had one that was reversible compound words.
Yep.
That one was fun. I don't know that I rang in and got very many of those, but I certainly knew those,
Mm-hmm.
as it were. So
Yeah,
several of them.
my numbers are showing that I think you got in on the $800 one on reversible compound
Okay.
words.
Yeah.
So, do you remember if there were any tape stoppages during any of your games?
No stoppages per se. There was one moment where I believe Alex started to read the wrong clue. And I'm sure they fixed that in editing, but someone, a producer, I'm sure immediately, brought that to his attention, and he found his place and read the correct clue. But I don't believe they stopped tape at any point.
Okay. Now, once you were defeated, did you end up staying?
They certainly gave me that option, and after Wednesday, the taping for the Wednesday episode is the lunch break, and I was just exhausted at that point. I think it showed maybe in my third episode with some of my reflexes, some of my responses. I think I got a few more wrong in Wednesdays. I was exhausted at that point, physically and mentally. So I just honestly, I went to my hotel and took a nap.
So, from that perspective, you weren't at all disappointed that you didn't make it to the lunch break and didn't get lunch on Sony's dime, as it were.
I hear that's a real treat, but I would have liked to. Obviously, I would have liked to keep playing, but it wasn't meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Any plans for the prize money, as it were?
I think we're ready to upsize our house a little bit. My wife and I, the house we're living in now, when we bought it, it was just the two of us, and we've added a dog and a son since then. So it's gotten a little smaller. At least it feels that way. So we'll probably look at selling this house and buying a new one in town somewhere.
Okay, very nice. Now going back to the airing at 2:30 in the afternoon bit, how much how difficult is it to kind of prepare a watch party, as it were, when Jeopardy airs at 2:30 in the afternoon?
Well, my work colleagues and my supervisors and that, they were certainly excited, and I was able to keep the secret from them. They had no idea how my first episode turned out. So they were eager to watch it as well. So our whole floor pretty much just stopped at 2:30, and we gathered around the TVs, and we were able to watch it. And then I had a group of friends that night that wanted to have something, and so one of them recorded it on their DVR, and we all went over to their house and ordered some pizzas and watched it
Nice.
again. Second time I'd seen.
Mm-hmm. So how difficult was it then to kind of rearrange the plans, as it were? Because I'm reasonably sure you were originally planning on having your first game showing up on March 26th, and it got moved up to March 12th.
Right, and your Twitter feed is actually how I first learned that it would be moved up. So thank you for that. I wasn't. I wanted to confirm it, so I sent one of the producers an email just saying, "Hey, I heard that this might be a possibility," and they said, "Yeah, you got moved up 2 weeks." Um, so yeah, I mean, we had not planned anything too. It wasn't set so much in stone that we had difficulty rescheduling it. It was easy enough
Okay.
to accommodate.
And I mean, that's certainly one of the reasons why I posted what I knew when I did, was because I figured that people, I just had a feeling that, uh, people would want to have as much notice as possible. And I've, from my experience with knowing how the show generally works, is that they probably would probably generally wait otherwise until they would send out the the photograph of you with Alex, to be like, by the way, it gets moved up, just because, I mean, it's easier for them to operate that way as a show, having to deal with all the dozens upon dozens of contestants every week, and it's just easier for their workflow to operate that way. So, I mean, obviously I'm working on a different workflow and thinking, well, maybe I should, give a heads up to, the general community at large, especially for those who may be already paying attention to that sort of thing.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate it. And, we know the reason why it got moved up. And I believe Alex's surgery was later in the week that my episodes taped. I certainly did not know anything was wrong with him. I'm obviously, as we all are, glad that he's back to his usual self and back at work.
And if I'm not mistaken, out the first set of episodes after Alex's surgery are next week, so that I'm sure a lot of people will be happy to see that Alex is still his very much his normal self next week. So
yeah. We also I don't know if you've heard, I don't think we got the full Maggie experience. I think she wasn't feeling well that day and had to go home early.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, I had remembered her from my auditions, the 2 adult show auditions, not the college episodes. But she was in the time that I did spend with her, she was great.
Well,
kept us all at ease and relaxed.
That's awesome. How different is it watching Jeopardy now compared to before you taped in December? So what sort of different things do you notice, or do you have any different feelings when you watch the show now?
To be honest, since I do record it and watch it later, I'll just be honest, I used to skip the interviews. And I certainly have a newfound respect for those, because I know how hard it was for me to come up with my own interview topics. So you learn, you hear some interesting stories about people. I probably didn't have the most interesting stories, but some people certainly do. So I do make it a point to listen to the interviews. When we got back to Alabama from our trip to LA, I'll be honest, it was a little hard to watch. It was just too surreal. It was like I was just there. Of course, I was watching episodes that had been taped months prior, but it took me a little time to get back into the daily routine of watching it.
I mean, again, that's certainly fair. That a lot of contestants actually have that same issue, as it were, trying to get back into the show, because either they're feeling disappointed about how they've done, or just because they felt burnt out, just of maybe from all the preparation that they did beforehand.
Yeah.
So, do you happen to have any questions for me, or anything that you thought I'd bring up tonight but didn't?
I can't think of anything unless Like you mentioned, I out of 9 daily doubles, I only got one. That looking back on it and rewatching my episodes, I do think that was certainly a benefit for Peter. I believe he got all three on Wednesday's episode,
He did,
and
yes.
I believe he got the last two, the two in Double Jeopardy, and that certainly helped him. Certainly helped him win that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's no hard feelings. Peter was a great contestant, and I believe he won Thursday as well. That's great.
Yep, he was certainly a very deserving champion, just like you were.
Yeah.
So, so that actually concludes all of my own questions. So thank you very much for joining me on hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel this evening, Zach.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great, great experience, and I like what you're doing, keeping the stats and keeping the contestants at the letting us tell our story.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you very much again for joining me. Again, we'll be back next Monday evening at 9:15 p.m. Eastern with some more hashtag Jeopardy Live Panel. I think I've already got one or two people lined up, so it's going to be quite a show. So once again, I'm Andy Saunders. Thank you so much for tuning in, and again, thanks to Zach for joining me. Have a great night.
Thank you.